Boy, you don't have to be that quiet for me. That's impressive. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Duber, and I'm chairman of the Board of Trustees of American University and a proud alum of the Kogod School of Business, class of 1981. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to a fantastic session in our Gamechangers and Sustainability Speaker Series with a true game changer, Tony Capuano. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
This event is hosted by the Kogod School of Business and the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics. Tony grew up in Baltimore and attended Cornell Hotel and Hospitality School. Our three sons also attended there, and I might add on a little personal note, I had a grandson born at 4:52 a.m. this morning.
Yay.
So for those of you students and thought you got up early, I've been up all night. So I pulled an all-nighter. After spending 7 years in real estate and consulting, he joined Marriott International, where he became a rising star and now has risen. He has held a number of roles at Marriott, including now president and chief executive officer. Marriott started in 1927. It is celebrating its 96th year. Today, it is the largest hospitality company in the world. Marriott's new headquarters are less than 2 miles away from the American University campus in a project that our firm, the Bernstein Companies, recently completed for them in Bethesda, Maryland. Marriott's breadth is staggering. 30 brands, 8,000 properties, 139 countries, and 1.5 million hotel rooms. The American University Strategic Plan is change makers for a changing world. We share this with the Marriott core philosophy. In that vein, today you will be hearing about sustainability and how Marriott has made a change in that world. Tony, thank you for joining us. To have you here at the school where my wife and I met and where I started my career is truly very special. We are honored for our students to get to meet you and hear from the number one leader in the number one hospitality company in the world. Thank you. Kogod Dean Dave Marchek will now hold a conversation with Tony, and then we will open up the floor for questions and answers from our students. Dave?
Thank you very much. Mark, thank you very much for being here, for your leadership, your friendship. I want to welcome Adam Bernstein, Mark's partner, and thank you for being here. You know, it's interesting.
My pleasure.
We're making major investments in sustainability, and we basically scoured the universe to say who are the most innovative companies in this space, and Marriott is one of them. So luckily, Mark knew you and was nice enough to ask you to come speak, and we're grateful for you being here. I also want to thank the students. 9:30 Friday morning, not exactly a perfect time, so thank you for getting up early and for being here. Let me start with you and your career. So you went to Cornell, then you went into real estate and advisory, and then why did you want to pursue a career in hospitality?
So originally I didn't. I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to get a congressional nomination to the Naval Academy and passed the physical, the fitness test, the vision test, and then got a letter from the Naval Academy saying, welcome to the Naval Academy. You can choose all of these things except flight school.
Okay.
Because I was a half-inch too short. So you can be too tall or too short. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do now? Right? I don't want to go to military school if I can't be a pilot. And at the time, my father, who was a career AT&T and then Bell Atlantic executive, was carpooling into D.C. And he carpooled with one of our neighbors who was the lead lobbyist for what then was the American Hotel Motel Association, now AHLA. And I had worked in restaurants growing up. And he said, you should go look at the hotel school at Cornell and like a petulant 17-year-old. I said, yeah, fine, whatever, and applied and was lucky enough to get in and just fell in love with the industry.
And your first job at Marriott was?
In the feasibility department. So the group, basically analysts that go out and evaluate projects, visit the market, collect data on the supply and demand side, and put together a pro forma that the development partner uses to help underwrite their project.
So we teach students how to develop pro formas. So when you were working on your first pro forma, did you think you'd become CEO of Marriott?
No, certainly not. In fact, I'm sure like at American U, at Cornell, they have a terrific career services office. And if you're an earnest student and you respond to all the prompts about companies that are coming to visit, ideally you get lots of interviews and hopefully several job offers. And when I was graduating, I interviewed with 8 companies, and I was lucky to get 7 job offers.
Wow.
And when I was appointed CEO a little over 2 years ago, Bill Marriott called to tell me I'd been appointed by the board, and I said, well, good, I don't have to carry that letter around anymore. And he said, what do you mean? Because the company that did not offer me a job was Marriott.
Really?
And,
okay.
Yeah. And so I kept that rejection letter, maybe as a bit of motivation. So no, I certainly did not think I'd ever be the CEO of Marriott.
Did he say, I made a mistake 30 years ago?
He said, let me see who the hell signed that letter. So I didn't rat him out.
And now, life as a CEO is glamorous, but it's also very challenging. So, for example, you stay in hotels how many nights a year?
Probably 175-ish.
170, and you stay in Marriotts.
Yeah, although I stay in competitors sometimes.
Really? And how's that experience?
It's terrible.
Terrible, okay. And
No,
when
I learn a great deal from staying in competitor hotels as well.
And when you show up at a Marriott, do you just surprise the staff? No. They know you're coming?
No, it would be unfair. And one of the great privileges of my role is spending a lot of time in our hotels, talking to our frontline associates, seeing how passionate they are about the careers and service that they've chosen.
And now you have 30 brands, as Mark said.
Soon to be 31.
31, okay.
We're under contract to acquire a mid-scale brand in Mexico called City Express.
Oh, great.
And we expect that deal to close in the next few months.
So do you like the Ritz or do you like Fairfield, or which one do you stay
I like
at?
them all.
You like them all, okay. And then
Which
actually,
of your children do you like the best?
Well, it depends on the day, actually.
No, I mean, it is interesting. I get lots and lots of questions because of the breadth of our portfolio. And the questions often sound something like, why do you have so many brands? You can't possibly manage a portfolio that broad. When are you going to divest yourself of a few of the brands or combine? And my answer is always consistent because I believe it, and that is I love the breadth of choice that portfolio offers, not only to our guests, but to our owners and franchisees. But then I'm quick to add, if you choose that model where you're going to have a portfolio that broad, our responsibility is to make sure that each of those 30 brands has a really well-articulated, clear, distinct positioning. And if I'm fair, I would give us an incomplete. I think the bulk of the brands in the portfolio enjoy that sort of distinct positioning. I think there are some that are still a work in progress.
And you have and Marriott was the first chain to actually innovate and create.
That's right.
You have all these brands because you have different price points and different customers. And so
and also just different trip purposes.
Right.
I mean, I get the opportunity to talk to lots and lots of customers. And it is not unusual to meet a customer who is on the road 75 days a year, and he or she stay in a Fairfield.
Right.
Because they're arriving at 11 o'clock at night, they're leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning, they need Wi-Fi, a comfortable bed, and a clean shower, and that's it. That same guest, when he or she takes their family on a vacation, they go to Ritz-Carlton or St. Regis or something else. And so those guests enjoy the breadth of choice because it allows them to pick the right product for each individual trip purpose.
Now, Marriott started a few miles away, I think Columbia Heights, 1927, with a 9-seat root beer stand.
That's correct.
So how did it grow? And then you used to be head of development, and I read that in your 10 or 11 years doing that, the number of rooms doubled. So how did it grow to be the largest chain in the world?
So Mr. and Mrs. Marriott Sr. were our founders, and Mr. Marriott Sr. was a sheep herder in Utah, and he saved his money and bought a used Model T, And he and Alice Marriott drove cross-country from Utah, came to D.C., opened the 9-seat root beer stand. They lived in a one-room apartment upstairs, and I think they opened in May. So they went right into the teeth of a hot, humid D.C. summer, sold a ton of root beer. They were doing great. And then winter came.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the business got very weak. Mrs. Marriott had studied Spanish in college. And so for about 2 weeks, every day she went and knocked on the back door of the Mexican embassy until they let her in. She convinced the chef at the embassy to share some recipes. She started making food in the one-room apartment, bringing it downstairs in the morning and selling it during the day. The business went from being the A&W root beer stand to the first hot shop. Wow. And hot shop grew into I'm sure many of your parents probably dined at hot shops, grew into a restaurant company. Mr. Marriott then noticed that people were coming in every day to buy lunch to go. And he started talking to his customers, and they said, why? Or he said, why? And they said, well, because I'm taking a flight at a national airport and there's no food. So he started the first online or inline in-flight catering company. And there's some great pictures in our archives. You used to have to walk up the stairs to board the plane. And there he and Mrs. Marriott are with a cart selling boxed lunches for 10 cents each. Wow. As people boarded the plane. So for the first 30 years of the company's existence, we were a food and beverage company. We weren't in the hotel business. And then during that time, Bill Marriott, our current chairman emeritus, was working his way up through the company. He tells a great story that I had never heard before. About a year ago, I joined the McDonald's board of directors. And when I called to tell him, he said, well, when you go to the first board meeting, make sure the McDonald's team knows they're the reason we're in the hotel business.
Right, okay.
And I said, why is that? And he said, when the first McDonald's opened in D.C., he and his father went to have lunch, and hamburgers were 15 cents, and they were selling them for 50 cents at hot shops. And he turned to his dad and he said, we're dead. We're never going to be able to compete. And that's when the company pivoted towards hotels. We built the Twin Bridges Marriott, was our first hotel about 50 years ago. And Bill Marriott said to his father, well, let me be the general manager. His dad said, you don't know anything about hotels. And he said, you don't either. Let me try. And so he was our first general manager. And the company grew from there. And it's really Bill Marriott who oversaw the company's growth into what is now the world's largest hospitality company. His father grew up in the Depression era, was terrified of debt. And as my friends at Bernstein can tell you, if you want to be a hotel developer, debt is your friend,
right,
or enemy sometimes.
Right.
So Mr. Marriott's really the one that grew the company.
But you now have about 1.5 million rooms.
We do. And another 500,000 in the pipeline.
500,000 in the pipeline. How many properties, how many different units?
We've got about 8,300 hotels.
And you own?
20.
20.
And
okay.
I'd be happy to sell any of you those 20.
Okay.
So we.
So why don't you own?
So we used to.
Okay.
In the late 80s, the tax laws were different, and our business model was quite different. We had a 3,000-person architecture and construction department. We would go out, acquire sites, develop hotels, get them up and running, sell the real estate to an investor, and retain the management contract. Well, all of a sudden, in the late 80s, early 90s, you had this confluence of events. First Gulf War, changes in tax laws, and we had between $3 and $4 billion of in-flight development projects with no buyers on the horizon. And the company was at real risk of failing. In fact, during that period, we were a company where in all our hotels we served Coke products.
Okay.
And Mr. Marriott was so worried about the financial distress that the company was feeling, he wasn't sure he was going to make payroll. And he went to the then CEO of Coca-Cola, said, I need you to make me a $50 million unsecured loan. In effect, I need you to bet on the future of this company. And Coke said no. And so he went to the Pepsi CEO the next day. Pepsi said yes. And we've been a Pepsi company for the last few decades.
So I can't buy a Coke in Marriott today?
In a luxury hotel, you can, because we never want to tell anyone no. But, so at the time, our CFO was a visionary financial engineer, a guy named Steve Bolenbach, who went on to run Disney and Hilton. And Steve conceived of this idea of spinning off the company I work for, Marriott International. And he said, that company's going to be great. They're going to have no debt. They'll own all the IP for the brands. They'll have all these valuable contracts. And he was right. The problem was what was left became Host, and they were this debt-laden company. Thankfully, the industry dynamics turned, and both companies have thrived. But since that time, we have really stayed with an asset-light model, and that's served us very well. And as I'm sure many of your students know, among the great advantages of that model, real estate ownership is volatile. It's fantastic when the market is good. It's not so fantastic when the market is weak. Because such a disproportionate share of our fees come off the top line, we don't have that wild volatility that our brethren on the real estate side have.
One of the things that's interesting about the hotel industry, you're selling the same room, but you're selling different products. So Monday through Thursday, it's one product for business travelers. Thursday night, it's a shoulder. And then Friday through Sunday, it's leisure. So how do you approach segmenting and pricing? So can I get the same room for the same price, whether it's a Monday or a Saturday?
So I'll answer that two ways. First, I was doing some investor meetings in New York yesterday, and as you might expect, those conversations were dominated by discussions about inflation. And one of the things I reminded many of the investors, I mean, inflation obviously can be good or bad depending on your business. It puts tremendous pressure on margins because you see inflation impacting many of the expense line items. But for the hotel business, we're in the enviable position of repricing our inventory every day. And so that's why you've seen such extraordinary rate growth over the last year or so because of, at least in part, in the inflationary environment. Your second point, though, is I would have given you a very different answer 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I could have invited this group of students who probably don't drink, but on the few times they do, I would have said, let's go sit in the lobby of the Marriott Marquis in New York and play a drinking game. And that drinking game will be every time somebody comes off the elevator, you have to guess, are they a business traveler, a group meeting attendee, or a leisure traveler? We would have ended that game stone sober because it would have been easy to determine. Today, we'd be passed out in an hour. And the reason for that is because of this concept that's emerged during the pandemic, but I think will last well into the future, and it's this idea of blended trip purpose. Right. And so many of us have been in a circumstance over the years where our child has a 4-day weekend from school. Our spouse says, let's go away for the weekend. Pre-pandemic, we'd look at our calendar for Friday and Monday and say, have fun. There's no way, my calendar's full. By necessity, over the last couple of years, we've learned, even if it's a little suboptimal, you can work from anywhere. So as a result, increasingly people are saying, I will go on that 4-day trip. Now, I may have to disappear into my room for 3 hours to do some Zoom or Teams calls, but I can do that. And where we really see it in the data, we've been looking at recovery trends by day of the week. And this goes to your original question. It used to be that Sunday and Thursday were the real shoulder days. It was kind of the transition between when the business traveler was coming or going and the leisure traveler was coming or going.
So your occupancy was low on Sundays, and therefore you could get a cheaper room.
Exactly.
Right.
Sunday and Thursday are the days of the week that have recovered most quickly. Wow. And the reason for that is increasingly, whether it's a business transient customer or group meeting attendee, they're saying, I'm going to tack on a day or two of leisure at the front and or back end of a business trip or a conference.
Got it.
It's great news for our business, but it will make it a little more complex for us to report out with precision. We're 61.3% business travelers, 26.9% group, because unless you're a special corporate customer, I'm not interrogating you at the desk.
Right.
I'm not saying which of these nights are business travel, which are leisure. It creates some operational both opportunities and challenges because the way I want to program and operate my food and beverage or my fitness or my spa is going to be very different for you on Tuesday and Wednesday than it is on Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
So if I'm a student and I want to get the cheapest rate at a Fairfield Inn, what's the best time to take that room? Is it the day before? Well, say you're going to New York for the weekend.
Never.
Never. It's always busy. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But no, I mean,
So
I
you're
think,
going to Newark.
What drives pricing power.
We have a lot of New Jersey students at AU, so yeah.
What drives pricing power is compression.
Right.
Right. It's sort of fundamental supply and demand. And so if you want a less expensive rate, you should travel during periods of lower demand.
Got it.
Right.
Now,
Don't ask for a room in Times Square on New Year's Eve.
Right.
And then try to negotiate a bargain.
You just opened a new headquarters, which is very innovative with the Bernsteins. One of the things you have there is a lab, like an innovation lab, where you actually have, I think, 16 hotel rooms. So you go into this hotel and you can be in a Ritz or a Fairfield or an AC. Tell us about that and why you did that.
So in the old headquarters on Fernwood Road, we took some old legal storage space and repurposed it as an innovation lab. And there was innovation space and, as you point out, some model rooms. But I'll call those model rooms mock-up rooms. They were Hollywood facades. They had styrofoam walls and fake furniture. What we've done in the new complex is in the headquarters building proper, we've built a real innovation lab. My friends at Bernstein will remember this. Among the challenges we had for them and Boston Properties, we said on the 4th floor, we need an area that's vented for welding. To which they responded, what in the hell are you welding?
Okay.
But it's not an innovation lab for show. We're building and experimenting down there. So we're building model rooms. We're building out bathroom configurations. We're building all sorts of things. What we've done, though, is in the hotel, we have leased a portion of the hotel to build working model rooms where we can actually put guests in there to experiment with new prototypes.
So then they'll give you feedback.
Exactly.
Now, one thing I have in some hotels is sometimes I show up and I can't figure out how to turn off the lights and I have to call someone. Is that just me or is that?
That's just you.
Okay,
No,
okay.
it's, it's a great point, and it's exactly the sorts of things that we're using this innovation space and these model rooms for. The best way to design the most functional, appealing room is to have folks spend a couple nights in it. We did a great exercise with a bunch of our Bonvoy members who are disabled. And we've had ADA, Americans with Disability Act, compliant rooms for as long as that act has been in place. But we designed it. So we brought in 100 of our disabled guests and said, tell us what works and what doesn't. And it was simple things for them that were lost on you and I. So for instance, you don't have Braille buttons on your thermostat.
Right.
There's a great LED readout, but I'm blind. I can't see it.
Right.
And we had a guest who was in a wheelchair, and he came in, and he said, do you have another extra wheelchair here at headquarters? And we said, of course. So we brought one down. He said, okay, sit in that wheelchair, and now climb into the bed. And we were 3 or 4 inches off. We were compliant with ADA,
Right.
but for someone that is actually trying to move from a wheelchair into the bed, horribly difficult.
So it's innovation through experimentation.
That's exactly right.
Another problem I have is I always have my key card demagnetized, but now I do the electronic phone.
Right.
So I don't
Mobile key.
have to go down and get a new key. But anyway, so you're starting a yacht.
We have started,
Okay.
yes.
So what is that?
So we launched, the name of the platform is the Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection. We launched the first yacht in October. It spends the summer in the Mediterranean, the winter in the Caribbean. It's a roughly 600-foot yacht built to Ritz-Carlton Finnish standards, 149 cabins, so very kind of small, intimate, and very deliberate in being characterized as a yacht. It is not a cruise ship. Thankfully, there's no buffet.
Okay.
There are 6 high-end food and beverage outlets. There's no showroom. There's no casino. It's like having a friend, a really wealthy friend with a beautiful yacht.
Okay.
The other thing that's been great about it is that during the pandemic, you heard many cities around the world wrestling with this idea of over-tourism. And I'll give you a great example. I sit on a nonprofit board called Save Venice, which restores art and architecture in Venice, Italy. The Venetians right now are so conflicted because it's an economy that relies on tourism, but these have been the best 2 years of their lives. It was easy to navigate the city.
Right.
The canals were as clean as they've ever been.
Right.
You may have seen news coverage. There were dolphins swimming through the Grand Canal. And so in Venice, they've actually said no more big cruise ships coming into San Marco. The Ritz-Carlton yacht can, for a few reasons. Its scale, and because we don't have casinos and showrooms. When we come to a port, our folks disembark, they eat in the restaurants, they shop in the retail, they really are active members in that destination. Whereas with some of the big cruise ships, they pour in, they buy a T-shirt, they go right back onto the ship. And so yachts 2 and 3 are under construction in France.
All right,
We'll launch yacht 2 in 24 and yacht 3 in 25.
If you need some students to test the product, we can.
Well, so, this is interesting. I was down there about a week ago. I did a CNBC interview on the deck, and the captain told me this, and I couldn't believe it. I asked him 3 times to confirm that I had the right numbers. So we have 250 associates working on board that yacht. For those 250 positions, we got 250,000 applications.
Oh my gosh.
1,000 applications for every job on board.
Amazing. Let's turn to sustainability. I actually, in preparation for this, I listened to your latest earnings call, and you actually took a portion of your earnings presentation to talk about ESG and sustainability, which is not typical for a CEO on an earnings call. So why is sustainability important to you? Who's driving it? Is it internal cultural? Is it your customers? Is it your brand? What is driving your move towards being one of the leading sustainable companies in the world?
So maybe I'll answer it personally and professionally. Personally, I think I would do it anyway. I am very much a believer that all of us are short-term tenants on this beautiful planet, and we have a responsibility to care for this incredible planet. And irrespective of what our employers or our schools or anything else do, my hope is that some of the work that needs to be done starts with folks just doing the right thing and being personally passionate about sustainability. When I put on my business hat, I always describe our business as having 4 constituents. Starts with our associates, our employees, our guests, our owners and franchisees, and ultimately our investors.
Right.
Every one of those groups is demanding not flowery talk, not a well-written page in the annual report, but they are demanding that we set stretch goals and report on our progress against those goals. Use customers as an example. It used to be, over the course of a year across the US and Canada, which is our biggest market, we might get 6 requests in the course of negotiating special corporate contracts or group event contracts for a report on our sustainability efforts.
So your customers are demanding it.
Now they are. I mean, almost every customer demands it. When we're competing for talent, I look across this room and say, I could fill a bunch of our positions. You are going to have lots and lots of choices about who you go to work with. My advice to you is that you find an employer and an industry whose values match yours. But what we hear from prospective future associates, same thing. Don't give me something that your very skilled writers in your communications department wrote. Tell me what your commitments are. Tell me why you're committed to it. Tell me how much progress you've made. And if you're falling short, tell me why and how you're going to fix it. So it matters there. Our owners and franchisees, most of them, we're very thoughtful about who we grow with. They are like-minded from a cultural perspective. They are just as focused as we are. And ultimately, our investors. I've been doing investor meetings for 15 years. In the last 5 years, it's hard to remember an investor meeting that hasn't had a portion focused on our efforts in this area. So it is a business imperative beyond something that just from a personal values perspective is
interesting
important.
that you broke it down into different stakeholders, and those are driving that. We teach a lot of that for our students in sustainability, and this is our fastest growing area. Let's talk about some of the things you've actually done. Okay, so I used to go to Marriott, and one used to go to Marriott and maybe steal those little shampoo bottles. And one may have a lot of those in their closet today.
Theoretically.
Theoretically. Okay. So
This will be an easier question, by the way. We were talking before we started, and I did an Economic Club of Washington interview with David Rubenstein. He went down this path, but he started with, how many people steal mattresses? I said, mattresses? I don't know that I've ever seen anybody steal a mattress.
Yes.
So the small bottles, I
Okay,
get.
so you can't, they're gone. They're no longer in. So how many bottles do you avoid putting in landfills a year now?
500 million
500 million.
will no longer end up in landfills.
That's extraordinary. Okay.
And what's interesting, when you look across our portfolio of brands, our brand leaders, particularly in the luxury tier, were terrified of this pivot. They said the luxury customer doesn't want that. They want the individual Bulgari shampoo
Right.
that they can take home,
Right.
theoretically. And so, we went to residential format. Our customers love it.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, now they're stealing,
They're still okay. Yeah. Okay.
we just opened a new Edition hotel in Tampa, and it was the first Edition I had seen. We have a Le Labo kind of bespoke set of amenities that we put in Edition hotels, and so it was the first hotel I'd seen with the residential format. And there was also a little tent card. We hope you enjoy. If you'd like to take them with you, great. They're $150.
Okay.
But we've gotten essentially no pushback from our customers.
One thing it's helped me, like one time I was in the shower and I actually used hand lotion to wash my hair, which didn't work very well. But now I avoid that because you have those containers. So what about, there's another issue which you've been focused on, which is very interesting from a sustainability and sustainable society perspective, which is human trafficking, okay? It's a scourge of the earth. It happens all over the world. They stay at hotels and they bring victims to hotels. So you have a significant initiative to train associates. Tell us what you've done and how that's impacted.
And so, again, maybe I'll answer it two ways. This is a personal passion for my family. There's an organization that was founded here in Washington called Innocence at Risk. My wife and daughter have volunteered for them for the better part of a decade, including volunteering at this orphanage in the Dominican Republic where all the children are direct or indirect victims of human trafficking. So I've been involved for a while. The reality is there are wonderful things that happen in hotels every day. Weddings, proposals, bar mitzvahs, family reunions, you name it. But there are some not so nice things that happen. And unfortunately, there are some bad actors that like the anonymity that hotels can provide. And it is just, scourge is the right word to use. And so what we did is we said, we've got to train our associates on what to look for. And if, God forbid, you see something, how to act as a result. And it's a little countercultural because we're in the hospitality business. We're welcoming all, we're wrapping our arms around them, we're doing all these things. So we don't want to turn our associates into policemen or women, but we want them to be aware. And so we developed this online training program. We've trained 1 million Marriott associates. We thought it was such an important initiative. It wasn't a competitive advantage. It was something important for society. So we partnered with the American Hotel Lodging Association and made that training platform available to all of our competitors. And so as a result now, 800,000 Hilton and IHG and Four Seasons employees have also gone through this training.
So is this something mostly you focus on in developing countries, or is it all?
No. The statistics here at home are shocking.
Okay.
And in fact, I did a LinkedIn post maybe a year or so ago, and it included a video clip of a group of our associates at the LAX Airport Marriott in Los Angeles. And in the interest of time, I'll give you the abridged version of the story. But one of our front desk clerks saw a young woman that just, she looked out of sorts, I guess is the best way to describe it, and came to the desk, very nervous, kind of looking around, at which point an older man came over and said, let's go. And it felt off. And so she said something to her supervisor went to our head of risk management. It seemed off, so they called the local police. The police came. The police arrived as 6 white panel vans pulled into the porte cochere. They went to the room. There were 6 young women in that room that were being trafficked. These vans had arrived to take them to 6 different cities. And they were all saved as a result of this training. And I could share with you dozens and dozens of stories like that. And it's just about awareness.
Wow. Food waste.
Mm-hmm.
So at AU, we're very focused on food waste. We received an NSF grant to $15 million for different parts of the school to study food waste. That's your next big area. So tell us what you're doing there and why this is important.
So again, I mean, even pre-pandemic, food insecurity was a significant and global issue. That's only been accelerated as a result of the pandemic. 40% of food prepared on planet Earth ends up in the trash. 40%. It's a shocking number. And in hotels, we have historically been a big culprit in that area. I told somebody a story earlier. Every year in February, we do one of our big board of directors meetings. Our corporate chef and his team come, and on the final day of the board meeting, we have a board lunch, and it gives his team a chance to show off a little bit, but also to talk about current trends and how we're incorporating those trends into the way we operate food and beverage in the field. And so at the end of that lunch, this was 5 or 6 years ago, as people were finishing up, he rolled a scale out and a trash can, and he started to talk about food waste a little bit. And as he was talking, he pulled a big plastic bag out of the trash can, dropped it on the scale. And he said, "This is the food waste we've had from the last 2 days, 24 pounds. And people were shocked. And he paused for a minute and he said, "Per person." Wow. And it was just this light bulb moment, certainly for me, but I think for the whole organization. And so what are we doing about it? Again, a lot of it is awareness. A lot of it is training. So we do something 6 times a year at headquarters called Taste Panel. Sometimes we've got a Ritz-Carlton chef coming in, tasting a menu. 2 months later, it might be testing grab-and-go breakfast sandwiches for Fairfield. What he started to incorporate into those are the methods we're using to try to combat food waste. So the last Taste Panel I attended, one of the appetizer courses was a delicious, fabulous, kind of spicy, chilled fruit gazpacho. So we all tasted it, we loved it. And he said, "You know how we made that? We went across the plaza to the hotel, and at the end of the buffet period, as they were breaking down, there were these big trays of beautiful, untouched fruit. So we took that fruit, we used half of it and made fresh juices for use in the bar, and we used the rest to make this soup." Similarly, Brad Nelson is the name of our corporate chef. He loves to talk about ugly vegetables. So if you've ever had the pleasure to go to the produce department at Balducci's or another beautiful grocery store, every carrot is the exact same length, the exact same shape, with no blemishes. That's not how most carrots look when they are procured from the farm. The ugly ones taste every bit as good. And so we've started to incorporate, and often the producers throw them in the trash. Right. But if you're using them for stock or for soup or something else, the appearance matters not at all. And so how do we capture those rather than allowing those to go into the trash? And then the third big initiative that we're doing, and I'd like to take credit as the corporation doing this is really the individual efforts of a lot of our culinary folks around the DC region. They, on their own time, with their own effort, formed a partnership with giant grocery stores. And a little known fact, unfortunately, when you go to the grocery store and you go to buy some chicken and it says sell by March 19th, on March 20th, March 21st, it's perfectly safe to eat. But we've trained consumers that food is bad. And as a result, a lot of that perfectly healthy food was ending up in the dumpster. So what our culinary teams are doing now, they have pickup points, and they go to the giant grocery stores. They pick up this food that would have previously ended up in the trash. They go use one of our hotel kitchens. They prepare these delicious meals, and they're distributed to shelters and other places in need of food.
That's amazing. All right, before we go to open up the question, let me just close with a couple skills and leadership questions. Okay, so you're obviously a gifted communicator and very comfortable giving presentations. When you were 22 and graduating college, Did you know how to give a presentation, give a speech? How did you develop that skill?
It's clearly a skill developed by trial and error. I was fortunate that the academic program I participated in gave us and required us to do lots and lots of presentations. It is a skill that is in short supply. I think many kids say, oh, good, it's a team project. Let's pick Johnny or Susie to do all the speaking. I'll do all the work, you do the presentation. It's a terrible mistake. The ability to speak, whether it's from the stage, whether it's sitting at a board table, the ability to clearly and in a compelling way articulate your point of view is critically important in almost any aspect of business.
And your career trajectory has obviously been meteoric and direct, but certainly you've had some setbacks, made some mistakes. What's a big mistake that you made that you had to kind of self-correct and maybe apologize or fix something that you wish in hindsight you didn't do?
I'd probably say I've made a billion mistakes, but rather than pick an individual deal or an individual circumstance, I might pick something a little more macro, and that is, to me, the most valuable skill for any aspect of business that is in increasingly short supply is the ability to be an active, deliberate, focused listener. No one listens anymore. We live in a world we get our news off the crawl at the bottom of the television or in 140 characters or whatever it might be. We're always thinking about where we have to be next. We're checking our texts. We're checking our phone. No one listens. And as you pointed out, I spent a disproportionate share of my career in development doing transactions. Early in my career, I was a better speaker than a listener. In the course of doing deals, what I learned is if you just sit and listen, and that doesn't mean stop talking. That means clear your mind. Don't think what time you have to pick up the dog. Don't think about what you're going to have for dinner. Don't think about anything else. Actually listen to what the person across the table is saying. Watch their body language, hear what they have to say. And if they ask you a question, it actually allows you to answer the question they asked. I sit in meetings all the time where I say, what time is it? And the person looks up from their phone and says, 48 and cloudy, because they have no idea what I just asked them.
Right.
And I think if I could give a young version of me advice, it would have been much earlier in my career to be a more deliberate listener.
Diversity. I've heard you talk about diversity. I think the Marriott corporate board is majority women or people of color.
Correct.
Your teams, I think you've established a goal of having 50% of your leadership be women or people of color in the next...
No, it's even a little more than that. So what we call our leadership, basically vice president and above, which at any given time is 850 or 900 top leaders in the company. I've set a goal by the end of this calendar year for that group to be at gender parity, so 50% female, and to be at least at 25% people of color.
And when you started in your running development, how many women did you have that were doing transactions?
Zero.
Zero?
Zero.
Okay.
When I got the global development job in 2009, 100% of our global transaction team was male.
Wow.
Today, it's about 32% female.
So you have a little ways to go, but good progress. Okay. Final question is, you're only the second CEO.
Sorry, can I?
Please.
I'd like to make one other point on a little like sustainability, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a great buzzword. Every corporation talks about it. Every CEO talks about it. You can't wake up one morning and decide to be a diverse, inclusive enterprise. It takes years, if not decades, of constant commitment. And the minute you are self-satisfied, you go into a death spiral. I mean, you shared some statistics which are great. I did a panel in New York, and I got a question about this. And I said, I am fiercely proud of sharing all of the progress we've made, because the numbers are best in class in the Fortune 500. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary of a board-level committee focused singularly on DEI issues. Again, best of class in the Fortune 500. And after I tick off those accomplishments, I'm quick to say, and none of it's good enough.
Right. Yep.
You know, if I walk out of here and say, good, mission accomplished, it requires deliberate, constant focus. It's a lot like culture. I think Marriott has the best culture in the world, but it is a living, breathing entity that has to be nurtured. And as soon as we're self-satisfied, we'll start to fall apart.
Last question. Why should the young people in this room want to work in the hospitality industry or for Marriott?
So I am going to do the equivalent of phoning a friend, and I'm going to quote my mentor, Bill Marriott. We every year in December, we do something called the Senior Leadership Meeting, where we have that top 800 or 900 together. I give a presentation. I usually bring a speaker from another industry and talk about what their experience has been over the prior year, have a couple of my team make presentations. And historically, we always had Mr. Marriott come and speak. And this time he was going to be out of town. We thought about having him record a video message. And our head of communications said, I have a better idea. You're going to go over to his house and have lunch with him. And so he and I sat at his kitchen table for a couple hours, had lunch, talked, and they recorded the whole thing, and then they chopped it up, and we ran it during the senior leadership meeting, and it was great. And towards the end, I said to him, and this is a year and a half ago, so we were still knee-deep in the pandemic, and I said, Mr. Marriott, your leaders all around the world are going to watch this video clip. They've had a heck of a last 18 months. What would you say to them to kind of prop them up and make them optimistic? And his answer was, classic Bill Marriott. He said, I would tell them, you picked a fun industry. And he's fairly irreverent. He said, you imagine spending your whole life working for a box manufacturer? That sounds horrible. Right? He said, think about what we do. We travel the world. We're in almost 140 countries. We're part of the fabric of people's best memories. They come stay with us for their honeymoon, for their birthday, for their anniversary, to celebrate their kids' birthdays or other, significant moments in their lives. He said, a career where you choose to be in the service of others is the most gratifying, noble career you could ever choose. And so that would be the advice and the encouragement I would give your students.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's open it up to, yes, we have a question right here. Maybe state your name and tell us what year you are. And
I'm going to stand up doing this.
yeah, stand up. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. My name is Christia. I'm in the School of Arts and Sciences, environmental science major. So with regards to sustainability, how does green infrastructure and LEED certified buildings and clean energy come into play?
Yeah, all great questions. I spent so much of my career in development, I am well aware, buildings, at least historically, were not great for the environment, right? So LEED is an approach to try and make buildings greener, healthier. I think where you were going at the start of your question, though, is the most important issue. And that is, if everybody at Marriott, everybody at all my peers, everybody across sectors does everything within their control to move towards achieving their sustainability goals, we won't get close without public-private partnership around the power grid. We just won't. And I've had the good fortune over the last year, I've been with Commerce Secretary Raimondo 3 or 4 times. I got to spend an hour with the president 6 months ago. And this is what the private sector has to hammer over and over and over. It is easy for government to wag its finger at private enterprise and say, you've got to do all these things. The SEC has come out with its draft requirements for reporting on ESG. I think the first draft was 960 some odd pages. And business should take that on for all the reasons I described earlier, but it's got to be done in partnership, because if we don't make fundamental changes to the energy grid, we will never get close to the sort of lofty goals that all of us have set for ourselves.
But your headquarters is LEED certified,
It is.
right? And then you're moving a lot of your properties
We
towards.
are, yes.
Okay, great question. Yes.
Thank you.
Right up here in the front. And if you're online and you have a question, just text it in the chat box and Sandra can read it out.
Hi there. Thanks so much
Hi.
for coming.
course.
Ryan Kasanoff. I'm a student in SIS and Kogod. Obviously, after COVID, the Chinese hotel market is vastly expanding. Could you talk a little bit about the growth in that market and a little bit about sustainability in the market as well?
Of course.
Thank you.
So China is our second largest market. We've got nearly 500 operating hotels in China today, and about the same number in the pipeline behind that. Given our asset-light model, we don't own a single hotel in China. 98% of our hotels open or in the pipeline are owned by domestic Chinese owners, whether they are private enterprise or state-owned enterprises. Like every market in the world, it's about opening borders and eliminating friction from travel. And as we've watched borders open around the world, as soon as borders open, we start to see a big spike in search. We start to see a big spike in booking. We start to see a big spike in both inbound and outbound travel patterns. And we start to see both stalled development projects restarting and significant new inbound inquiries on incremental additional projects. We're starting to see the same thing in China, although it is early. It's made more complex because visa wait times are terribly difficult. In fact, I'm going to Hong Kong tomorrow. I would rather be going to Shanghai, but I'm in the queue to get my visa updated. I've been in the queue for 4 months, so we're going to go to Hong Kong instead. The central government has identified 20 countries that are kind of green countries, not green sustainability, green in terms of open travel. We're seeing huge outbound Chinese booking patterns into those 20. Unfortunately, the US is not one yet because we still have the testing requirement for inbound Chinese travelers. But my expectation is over time, as friction is removed, as the borders become more and more open, you'll see both inbound and outbound China travel recover the same way we've seen it in other markets around the world. Sustainability, I will tell you that there is lots of good conversation in China about sustainability, less action on the real estate development side than I think any of us would like to see.
So opportunity. Okay. Yes, over here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Ted Shiano, I graduated AU in 2017. I was a Kogod student.
Okay.
So you had mentioned that a lot of investors are demanding you set these goals and then track your progress to those goals and see how you're doing. So how do you go about, accurately tracking those goals? Maybe we can focus in on the decarbonization and carbon emissions. How do you go about tracking all those goals and making sure that from an accurate perspective, especially given that you are an asset-light business and don't actually own those? Yeah.
It's among the most important questions. So I'll give you a kind of a micro and a macro answer. On a micro basis, every year, even before all our constituents started to demand, we publish a report every year. It's called the Serve 360 report. It outlines those goals. It shows the progress we're making against those goals, talks about our initiatives, highlights some of our successes, talks about some of the incremental additional programs we intend to roll out in the near future. But the challenge is exactly as you identified. We have a set of criteria we use to measure. I wish I could tell you they were the identical set of criteria that all of our peers use, that companies in other sectors use, and they're just not. And this is another area that will require public-private partnership. My fear, based on trying to wade through the SEC guidelines, is this will be about over-regulation rather than simplifying and allowing for a consistent set of apples-to-apples comparisons, which is what we should all ultimately endeavor to have, right? I want to know with confidence. Otherwise, it's just slicing and dicing data. I'm going to put out a report saying we're doing great. And then my friend Chris at Hilton across the river is going to use a different slicing and dicing of the data to say we're doing better. That doesn't help anybody. if it's comparing an apple and a kumquat. We've got to have some baseline consistency on how we measure and what metrics we're measuring. And I would say that in the US, the industry broadly is very early in its infancy in trying to get to a place where we've got a set of metrics that everybody can rely on.
Just as a sign of how this is, we're teaching our first class ever on measuring sustainable outcomes this year. Professor Ajay Adhikari is doing it, and it's a hot class, and it's really emerging, and we have great speakers coming in from EY and other places that are figuring out how to measure sustainable outcomes. Next question. Yes, in the back.
Hello, thank you. My name is Myrtle. I'm from the School of Public Affairs, and I actually had two questions. So obviously, as Marriott was expanding, you couldn't really oversee every single chain. You had to start outsourcing different work and have other people start overseeing how all these hotel chains are running. And the first question I wanted to ask is how you were able to scale up effectively and ensure that as you were expanding, you didn't run into issues where your goals and your priorities weren't being met by the people you're trying to outsource the work to. And second is how you develop strategies to maintain a consistent client flow, because I'm also running a college consulting startup. And even though these are two completely different industries, I like to see if, some of your insight could also be used to apply to what I'm trying to do.
Great. So on the first question, I would say to you, given our asset-light model, the selection, care, and feeding of our owners and franchisees is that much more important. There are probably companies out there whose criteria for somebody to be a franchisee is that the check clears. And if that's your business model, you are going to have a heck of a time doing exactly what you said, ensuring that there is a continuity of treatment of associates and guests across geographies and across brand platforms and across the managed versus franchise portfolio. What we do is really use the company's core values and try and identify partners that share those values. We, of course, have all the tools that you would expect, quality assurance audits, brand standard audits, all the sorts of things we do tactically to make sure that the hotels are living up to what we expect them to be. But we really don't worry about it as much if we've identified the right partners whose core values match us. On the customer side, there are at the property level, granular, let's get out to the local businesses and show them what we have to offer. And then there are global approaches through our global sales organization. But the most powerful tool I would suggest to you is our loyalty program, Bonvoy. It's got 177 million members. And it's the best platform we have to stay connected. The loyalty team, the phrase they like to use is to ensure that there's a stickiness in our relationship with our customers. That has certainly been tested over the last couple of years. Imagine making a huge bet on a loyalty program where all of a sudden those 177 million members aren't staying in your hotels anymore. How do you stay connected with them? And I think some of the innovations we've done over the years with branded credit cards. In the early days of the pandemic, we launched a partnership between Bonvoy and Uber, so that every time on lockdown you ordered Uber Eats, you were earning Bonvoy points. We were communicating with you about how much closer you got to this dream vacation when borders started to open. And so loyalty is probably the platform that is most impactful on our relationship with our customers.
So let's take one more question, which is an online question, and then we're out of time. Go ahead, Sandra.
Okay. We have a question from Layla Hernandez, and she said when she worked at the Austin Capitol Marriott in 2003, Marriott's motto was, "We take care of our associates so that our associates will take care of our guests." Is that still the motto?
It is. So those were the words of J.W. Marriott Sr. when he started the root beer stand. And because of the humility of the company I think sometimes the Marriott family in particular doesn't get all the credit it deserves for having been such an innovative employer. I mean, when he started the company, he noticed people were calling in sick because either they needed to go to the doctor, they had a sick child. So he hired a full-time physician to be on the staff of the company so that if somebody had a medical issue, they could have it taken care of at work. And so his theory was simple, but it is a theory that has served the company exceedingly well for 96 years. Take care of the associate. Because if you take care of the associate, they'll take care of the guest, and the guest will come back again and again. And so it is absolutely a core pillar of the company's culture.
So what we've seen today is a leader who not only runs the largest hospitality company in the world, 86 countries, 1.5 million.
138 countries.
138 countries.
It was 139.
Yeah,
but
Russia,
we pulled
you're
out
out
of
of
Russia.
Russia.
Yeah.
But also someone who is a change maker, who has created a diverse board and diverse leadership team, who has cut 500 million small bottles out of landfills per year, who is combating human trafficking. And so, Tony, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for being a game changer in sustainability.
Well, and thank you for having me, and most importantly, thank all of you. It's almost over for me. I'll be riding off into the sunset in the blink of an eye. But you made a joke about it, but the fact that you're here on your own time, early on a Friday morning, that you're passionate about these issues, that you care about the environment, you care about being impactful in whatever community you're ultimately going to work in, gives me tremendous optimism about the future. So thank you.
And thank you to Mark Duber.
Great.